So this set me on a lifelong pursuit of what did the early church have that we seem to be missing? What was the fire, the passion they had? So yeah, I couldn't find the answer. So my team and I just went to Israel and dug it up.
Hey, welcome back to The Pursuit, everybody. I'm Jeff, and this is John. And before we introduce you to our special guest today, we want to make sure that we tell you a little bit about our presenting sponsor for today's episode. We're pleased to tell you about Cornerstone Payment Systems. They're our presenting sponsor for this episode today, and their merchant service solutions serve this broadcast, and we believe will faithfully serve your business and your ministry with credit card processing. So if you're in need of those kind of services, make sure you reach out to them, our friends at Cornerstone. Their number is 888-506-0208. We've got them on the screen here, this number, so make sure you reach out to our partner today. And here's the cool thing. If you tell them, when you call them, if you tell them you heard about this offering on The Pursuit, they'll give you $100.
You know, I've tried that at the restaurant before. I just walked in and said, I know you. And that doesn't always work, but you're telling me this is more reliable than
If you tell somebody at the restaurant they know me, they'll charge you an extra $100
That's
on
actually
your tab.
what ended up happening.
Probably what happened.
So.
Well, we've got a great guest today. Not that we don't have a great guest every episode, but today is I'm especially excited about our guest today. He is the author of this book that I have a copy of here called The Early Church on Fire. And this is not even... You can't even get this book yet, and I got it.
I've been coveting that
and you
copy.
didn't get a copy, and I did. But I'm excited to introduce to everyone Dr. Stephen Smith. Dr. Smith is a native of Indiana, so we have labeled him as the modern-day Indiana Jones.
In fact, I gave our listeners some homework to do over the weekend. Those that are under 35, I said, go watch Indiana Jones. So hopefully by the time this airs, you've done your homework and watch that movie.
Well, the crazy thing is he's actually from Indiana.
I know, that's the strange thing. He actually is coming live right out of Indiana.
Dr. Smith has spent most of his life in education and ministry leadership positions. He attended Bob Jones University in Greenville, South Carolina. He got a BA in Biblical Studies and a minor in Ancient Languages. Just kind of tack that on, I guess.
It naturally goes with that.
He attended Calvary Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he earned his Master's of Divinity degree. He also planted a church in Rock Hill, South Carolina, while working on his doctorate of ministry. And once he was there, he helped form the Indiana Baptist Seminary in Greenwood, Indiana, where he became the dean of the seminary. Not that any of that is enough, but he went on to earn his PhD, concentrating on higher education and ancient biblical studies. And he's taught Greek and Hebrew in seminary in Kenya, and currently serves as the executive director as Digging Deep Ministry, where he spends much of his time translating ancient transcripts and religious symbols. He's also the founder and director of the Early Church Research Institute. So, with all of that, Dr. Smith, welcome to The Pursuit. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff and John. Thanks for letting me be on.
Absolutely. Well, we have a lot to cover today.
A lot.
And matter of fact, here's the cool thing is Dr. Smith in advance has already agreed to do multiple episodes with us because there is just so much to unpack. And so I'd just like for you to talk a little bit, Dr. Smith, about how you got involved in archaeology, specifically in Israel, and kind of the story behind the prompting of God calling you to that.
Well, Jeff, I began preaching when I was 12, and God put a passion in my heart even then to find the early church. You read the book of Acts, and the early church set the world on fire. People were begging to get into the church. They were joining the church knowing that there was a good chance they would be martyred or killed, and they still joined the church by the droves. And today, you know, we have programs, we knock on doors, we invite people, we hand out tracts, and we can't bribe people to come to church. We have a really hard time getting people in church. Back then, they couldn't house them. They had so many people. And so I began even when I was 12 saying, what are we missing? So this set me on a lifelong pursuit of what did the early church have that we seem to be missing? What was the fire, the passion they had? So I couldn't find the answer. So my team and I just went to Israel and dug it up.
You know, I love when we talked on the phone earlier, we were talking about our conversation today. And one of the things you said is, you know, Okay, so certainly I'm going to go to a biblical institute, a university, and they're going to teach me about the secrets of the early church. And you said I didn't find it there. You said, well, certainly they're going to tell me at seminary, and they didn't tell you there. In your studies for your doctorate, you didn't find it there, and it was God just kind of spoke to you, didn't he? And said, hey, let me show you. Come with me.
Yes, this is my calling. This has been my life's calling. So
what's
following
neat
God.
about
Well, I'm sorry, Doc. I keep stepping on here, but the thing I think about is, I would guess that in every single person that's listening here today, their greatest desire is to know, why am I here? Why did God put me on earth, right? And they may not even consciously be asking that question, but down deep, I think all of us are asking that question. And for you to be able to say that God has given me that answer, what a gift.
It is a gift to be able to know your calling and to follow it. And I didn't know my calling when I was 12. I didn't know where God was leading me. But I just kept following the passion God put in my heart. And now looking back, I said, it's so simple. It was so clear, but it wasn't clear at the time. So follow the passion God's given you, use your gifts and the style God's hardwired you with, and you'll find your calling. And there's nothing great in the world than living in the calling God's put on your life.
Were you always fascinated with language? Is that something that was even earlier than 12? Is that something that's always been fascinating to you? And is that what led you to sort of say, within this field of archaeology, where you could be digging up artifacts that have nothing to do with the written word, you chose to focus on, let me see if I can get this right, archaeolinguists. What is it? Archaeolinguist.
I'm an archaeolinguist.
There you go. Say something right there. Took me 3 times, but I said it.
Yes, sir. Languages is kind of fascinating me a little bit. The truth is, when I got to Bible college, by my sophomore year, I had to declare my minor, and so I asked a friend of mine who's a little bit older, who just finished Bible college, what should I minor in? He said, take all the Greek you can. I said, why? He said, because it will help you when you get to seminary. I said, sounds good to me. So I took Greek and I fell in love with it. And I said, well, if that's true of Greek, it must be true of Hebrew as well. So I wound up with several years of Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. And then I kind of, after I learned everything I could from the schools, I went out on my own, began to learn Paleo-Hebrew. I had to teach myself first century Greek. It's called Koine Greek, the Greek out of Israel during the time of Christ. Koine is kind of a misnomer because it's really not a, Koine means common. It wasn't a common Greek. It was a very specific Greek. And very few people in the world can read that. And I'm just fascinated by it. And so it's just my calling. It sounds odd, but it's just the way God wired me.
So there's, when I was in school, I had to decide whether I was going to take German or Spanish, type thing. And I'm sitting there, Paleo Greek or Koine Hebrew or whatever was not on the option or on the menu of things that I could take. But I wonder, how does one go about actually learning that? Do people actually still speak that in small circles today? Are there teachers? Did you have to do this all from books with a basic understanding of Greek? And how did that happen?
Well, in seminaries, in a Bible college setting, there are people who teach Greek and Hebrew very basically. There are books, but the truth is, I found most don't really understand it, especially the Greek. The Hebrew is the only language that ever died and came back to life. Uh, the early Greek, the Greek from the first century church, is different than any other Greek out there. I mean, there was contemporary Greek with the time. There was, they spoke Coptic down in Egypt and Doric and Homeric Greek a little before that. There were other Greeks, but this Greek's very unusual because you had Hebrews who spoke Hebrew in the temple, Aramaic at home. They spoke Latin in business, but they spoke Greek on the streets. So they were Hebrews with a Hebrew dialect, with a Hebrew mindset, speaking Greek. And it's a theological language because it was in a theological context because it was Israel. So it's kind of a tough one. So I learned everything that was out there, what people thought they knew, and then I began to, because I was on so many different archaeological sites, I would see this, first to third century writing in situ. I'd see it on the site, untouched, found just like it was, left 2,000 years ago. I see the real deal. And it's nothing like I thought it was or was taught in school. It's that writing's all capitals, no spaces, no punctuation. So it's kind of like a puzzle to try to figure it out. And so you get to the first century Greek. Uh, I'm probably the only person on earth who can read that because I've had to teach myself how to read it because I've dealt with so much of it on the sites.
And so that really leads us to our primary topic today, which is understanding the early church through icons. And so not only was it the written inscription that you've had to decipher and understand, but then layer on top of that these icons. Talk a little bit about, if you would, the golden tablets and some of the things that the Lord was able to reveal to you through that experience.
A friend of mine in Texas has he acquired two gold tablets, is technically the name. They're like the size of a large postage stamp, about that tall, that wide, 24 karat gold, thin leaf, written on by somebody around the first century. My friend bought these and had no idea what they were. They just looked important and looked like they could be biblical. So he bought these, sent a picture of these to 7 major universities around the world, international universities, ORU, DTS, Texas A&M was some of the ones I remember. No one could translate a word on any of them because it's such an unusual form of Greek. He then sent them to me and said, Steve, I know you know Greek. See what you can do with these. Well, I didn't know he'd already sent them to several other universities. So I translated them, and 8 hours later, I sent him back the translation for both. And he was amazed, said, send me every detail of how you got this. I said, okay. So I wrote it up. Well, then he took my work, took it back to 5 of the universities, and they all confirmed that my work was right on the money. Of course, once you solve the puzzle, then it's easy to say, oh, yeah, that is the answer. So God kept speaking to me and saying, there's more here. Now, these gold tablets have a writing in the middle in first century Greek, but then around the outside edge, it has all these pictures. I said, what's to do with the pictures? If I was going to write something on 24 karat gold, a thin plate, I would write more words. Why did they use pictures? It made no sense. And God kept saying, there's more there. There's more there. And I worked with these. And, every time I visit Israel, I'd like, I've seen that picture on those tablets and that picture and that picture and that picture. And then one day God just had to hit me over the head, said, you big dummy, they're not pictures. They're icons. We use icons, do we not? Every society does. I mean, the problem in Israel in the first century was you had people from all over the world, and most people couldn't even read or write anyway, and they had all these different languages. So how else do you communicate in a multilinguistic society, especially when 80% of the people can't read or write anyway? We use icons, do we not? Everybody knows that a cigarette with a red circle and a slash means
no smoking. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't care where you go in this world. Everybody knows those 2 golden arches means
Chick-fil-A.
Almost.
And they're not even a sponsor. They should be.
They should gave them something for free, dude.
Freebie. Yeah. we need to hit them up, see if they will. So, we use icons. Well, why wouldn't they use icons? Of course, the early church used icons because the early church was from all over the world, right? And so they used icons to communicate. Well, now these 2 gold tablets, we know what the writing in the middle says. Now we know what the icons mean. They're kind of like the Rosetta Stone to the icons of the early church. And so, not to steal a line off Da Vinci Code, but it's accurate, the icons are language in themselves. Mm-hmm. So now we've opened up a whole new world of information about the early church we didn't have before, because now we can read the icons.
So give us some insight, Doc, as we established your purpose, that is God saying, I want you to go dig up the early church and I'm going to reveal things to you. He clearly is beginning to teach you about the early Greek and the different abbreviations that they would use, and it's pieces of puzzles that are being put together that you're applying from different digs and different explorations that you're able to couple together to answer some questions. Then you filled in for us real nicely the idea of these icons and how they add to the story. Share with us some of the few things that you've discovered now about the early church based on these things that the Lord's allowed you to find and to dig up and to uncover.
Well, I'd first say get the book. It's all in the book. But let me give you a couple examples. One of the shocking elements I found about the early church that I was not taught in seminary and did not learn in my doctorate degree is the early church was very close to the Jews. In fact, a lot of the early church was Jews. We're taught, well, the Jews were bad, Jews were evil. Yes, Christ had a problem with some of the Pharisees. I've got a problem with some of the Pharisees, but that was not all the Jews. From my estimation, more than half of the Jews got saved and followed Jesus, accepted him as the Messiah. So the early church was very Jewish. They kept the feasts. Uh, we should keep the feasts because God says they're for my people forever. We've been taught in our church histories that's been handed down to us that the Jews were bad and evil and don't do anything Jewish. That's what Eusebius wrote in his first church history. But that's not what the archaeology says. They were one. Uh, I've got a couple books here. One's about 50 years old, one's about 8 years old. And they're both about the archaeology of the early church and the synagogues. And they both come to the same conclusion. We don't know why there's so much Christian stuff in the synagogues, the Jewish synagogues, and we don't know why there's so much Jewish stuff in the churches. Well, it's easy because they were the same. They were one. They worshiped and they served God together because one of the favorite things I found is if you find an inscription that's significant in Israel, you found something huge. You find the same writing, same saying twice, it's really big. We have one we found 4 times, and they all cry out to our one God. There's not 2 gods. There's not the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. There's not 2 testaments. It's one Bible, one story, one God. And we need to worship and serve that one God together. And that's one of the big things I've learned in my discoveries of the early church.
I tell you, one of the examples in the book that I love is you talk about the crocus flower, the six petaled flower, and its significance and its meaning. In just a few minutes, I know that's hard to ask. In just a few minutes, can you kind of give us, the viewer, a little bit of a taste and a teaser on some more of the stuff that they're going to find out in this book about things like the crocus flower, which leads to this connection that you're talking about?
Well, the 6-leaf crocus flower comes from a very specific area, which is Bethlehem Ephrata. Not Bethlehem, the city where Jesse lived, the Bethlehem Ephrata, the farm village, which was a mile down the hill. And that crocus flower grew natural there. And so the priest would take the middle of that crocus flower, and that saffron was used to anoint the lambs, the sacrificial lambs at the temple. Well, the priestly family that had that responsibility over that crocus flower was Mary's family, Mary, the mother of Jesus. Okay? So that 6-leaf crocus flower is the oldest icon that we know of. And it eventually became what we know today as the Star of David. But the 6-leaf crocus flower represented the house of David. So was Jesus of the house of David? Yes, he was. Of course he was. So when Jesus died on the cross, his followers took the 6-leaf rosetta, took off 2 leaves, and formed it into a cross and made a 4-leaf rosetta. So they're still followers of the house of David, but they're following the Messiah, Jesus Christ, of the house of David. Beautiful picture, gorgeous picture.
And I think another observation that you can read about in the book too is it's from this same place that the sacrificial lambs that were used at the temple were raised. And so you see that fulfillment, right? The old covenant of utilizing the lambs for sacrifice fulfilled by Jesus coming from the very same place that these lambs came from. It's just things like that are uncovered in this book, and Dr. Smith has had the ability to uncover and reveal through proof buried in the ground that just strengthens faith.
My question is, because we talked about these icons, and you said that they're sort of a new tool that you're using to decipher old text. Have you found that things that maybe you thought were well understood or well established, that may have been surrounded, I think you mentioned that most texts that you find do have these icons, symbols around them, But the things that were once kind of well understood or thought to be well understood, now with this new tool of these icons, has unlocked some new understanding around things that were previously thought to be well understood.
Oh, absolutely. Many things in the Bible. Without giving away the book and our subsequent work, the book of Revelation, we have found some keys to the book of Revelation that once you understand them, it's like, this is so simple. How did we miss it? But right now it's a mystery and people read it. We find passages I've translated from the Greek, the Hebrew numerous times. I know those passages well. And now everything's being unlocked because we have a new context. And the context changes everything as far as our perception and understanding. It's not that our theology was necessarily wrong before. We have a new layer, if you will. It's a deeper layer. We have a more thorough understanding of what God was talking about. And so even my team and I, as we discover new things, we're like, this is what God was talking about. It's so simple. It's so easy. How could we have missed it? But if you don't have the context and you don't know, you just don't know. You have no way to understand that. So I'm addicted. I'm addicted to reading the Bible and to studying the Bible. I can't put it down, it seems. I love it. And if I had time, I just study all the time because I feel like I'm reading the Bible for the first time. I can't tell you how many times I've translated the New Testament in the Greek. I can sight read it in the Greek, and how many times I've translated the Old Testament in the Hebrew. But I feel like I'm reading the Bible for the first time. The information we're finding and the learning curve is an exponential curve. It's exciting. I'm ecstatic. I'm thrilled.
You know what I'm sitting there thinking about is you and I will occasionally do Bible studies where we do word studies, right? So one of the things that we talked about on air before is this concept of banah as being discernment and that adding a new layer of understanding to what really God is asking us to do when we're trying to understand the scripture. I'm just sitting there kind of hypothetically playing out, having Dr. Smith in the room with us while we do some of those word studies. That would be a totally different level of understanding around context around some of these original words.
Well, I tell you that to your point, that's what you were thinking about in my mind. What I was thinking about is the time that I went to Israel. I've been there once, and to your point, Doc, you were talking about how you now read the scripture differently because of the things that you've seen and the things that God's revealed to you in these archaeological digs. And I just remember what it was like coming back from Israel, going to some of the biblical sites and just how the Bible came alive to me there. So I can only imagine how much more exponentially that happens for you in your research. But Doc, we've got a lot more to talk about, and unfortunately we don't have any more time. So promise me, and you already have, but promise me on air in front of the whole world that you're going to come back for another episode. We're going to talk about what next. What topic would you like to hit on next?
I believe we'd like to go next to some of the things we've discovered that have to be found before the end of times in these last days, these last hours. Information that has to be known, because as you know, the temple will be rebuilt according to the Bible. And I know there's some, discrepancies about that, some discussions about that. But we found a lot of information that has to be known, has to be understood in order to have temple worship, in order for the temple to be rebuilt, pieces and parts that have to happen. And we're excited about it because we're right at the last days. And we know what has to happen according to the Bible. Mm. So I think I'd like to talk about that if possible.
That would be fantastic. We would love it. Hey, for our viewers out there that are dying to order this book, as I have copy number 1 here, how do they do that, Doc? Where do they go?
Our websites for the book is earlychurchonfire.com, earlychurchonfire.com, and it should be ready to print any day now. We're just waiting on a few last minute details. Everything's set up. So if they want to pre-order, we can go to that site and we can take care of you.
We'll also put a link on our website as well out to point to that as well. So,
or I'm going to put this on eBay. The highest bidder can get this book right now. You don't have to wait.
Grab it.
You don't have to wait for Dr. Smith. No, just kidding. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to the next time you'll join us. So blessings to you and your team, and good luck with this book. I know it's going to do well.
It's going to be awesome. Can't wait to read it.
Thank you for joining us on The Pursuit here today. Make sure you go visit our website, thepursuitonline.com. We got all kinds of cool resources.
Subscribe on YouTube. Hit the subscribe bell in the upper, I think, left-hand corner. Make sure you hit notify on your phone, because you can hit subscribe on the website and not be notified if you have notifications turned off on your phone.
Absolutely. Hey, I hope you guys had a good time today. Blessings to you. Thanks for joining us on The Pursuit. See you next time.